to tell a war story here that's too
Okay,
long.
no problem.
But essentially what happened was I was flying a helicopter in Germany, had taken off from Coleman Army Airfield, and was cleared on an IFR flight plan to an Air Force base in Western Germany.
Right.
And shortly after departure, we entered the clouds. I was with a friend of mine who's my co-pilot, and he actually had not very much experience on instrument flight rules.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as we entered the clouds, he got vertigo. And so he was sitting there wrestling with this, and I don't know if you know much about vertigo, but it's actually like your brain malfunctions. So I was flying, I was making radio calls, I was managing the cockpit, everything by myself for a while. And about the time we leveled off, I had noticed before that we were picking up some ice, which is normally not a problem. By the time we leveled off, I realized that we had picked up a significant amount of ice, and when I did a cross-check, I looked at my engine temperature, and it was in the yellow, which means that the ice was encroaching on the engine inlet and starving the engine for air. Okay. I also noticed that I had picked up about 13 pounds of torque, which means there was over an inch of ice on my rotor blades.
Mm-hmm.
If you get more than half an inch of ice on your rotor blades, you cannot auto-rotate. So if my engines failed because it was starved for air, I would have to enter auto-rotation, but I could not auto-rotate, which meant I was going to be basically a brick.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I had a few minutes to make a decision about what to do.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And, you know, the fact that I'm still alive tells you that I did not do what my crew chief was doing, which he started praying in the back seat.
Okay.
Fortunately, I didn't need him to do anything for me.
Right.
But I contacted Frankfurt Approach, got us vectored back over to Coleman, and Coleman brought me in on a precision approach. And as we were coming in, the thing that was going through my mind was not, you know, I hope some supernatural entity bails me out of this, was I hope I don't hit the power lines that are on the approach end at Coleman Army Airfield.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that sort of makes sense. I mean, generally people. The thing is, you are facing death. I agree with your situation. I'm not trying to put anything away from your situation or anything like that. But I mean, you weren't even at that mode of thinking, you know, of loved ones or whatever, because that's usually what happens towards the very end. You weren't quite to the very end
everyone.
yet. Does that make sense?
I don't know how much longer we're going to waste on this, Steve. You believe stuff because you like it. You believe stuff because you like it, not because you have evidence.
No,
right?
I agree. There is no evidence. But rationally thinking, I think if you don't like the idea of life ending and just like that, a brain rationally, I would assume, would rationally think of supernatural things.
You have a different definition of rational than I do. And what I like or don't like, is irrelevant.
I mean, I agree that
I don't like the fact that I'm broke, but I don't go around acting like I'm not.
I agree that what you're describing does happen. It does happen for some people. I don't agree that it's rational.
And I don't think it's relevant. Because we're talking about whether or not something is true, and we're also talking about whether or not something is believable, whether or not belief has been justified. And you called to say that you used to be an atheist, but now you've changed your position, and we've already established that it's because you prefer a different view on reality that has no ties to what's actually true or demonstrable.
Well, I would say, I mean, that makes sense, but like in terms of truth, I mean, everyone is, well, not everyone. I mean, my wife is definitely not one of a truth seeker, but you know, normally atheist people are generally knowledgeable. I mean, they know a bit about everything, whether it be science or any kind of religion or whatever. They know a bit about everything.
I don't think that's true either, but I'll let you keep going.
So, like in those situations where you are towards the very end, I mean, and you are confronting death, I would assume that a rational brain, unless they like the idea that life ends and that's it, that they would probably think of supernatural, whether it be
Why do you think
through
that's
wormhole.
rational? Here. It's really simple. I have a brain that doesn't like the idea that I'm going to die. And when I'm dying, what reason would I have to spend time contemplating? I realize that it does happen. What rational reason would I have to waste time contemplating something that I don't think exists? If I'm rational, wouldn't I spend that time in a way that's more productive? Perhaps thinking about thinking about the parts of life that I enjoyed. Thinking about the parts of life that I enjoyed, thinking about loved ones, or saying, oh, wow, I'm actually going to die. Let's see what happens. Hello?
So, yeah, I'm here. So the position that you're taking, that you like the idea that life just ends.
No.
We never said
Well,
that. I mean,
to some extent.
No, but what I'm saying is,
to some extent,
in
yes.
those final seconds,
to some extent, yes.
I would think it's not just rational, but probably by instinct, a human brain would think about supernatural things,
Okay.
whether it be
Stop,
floating
Steve.
through a wormhole
Steve.
or going to be reincarnated or
Steve.
going. Yep.
Stop. You have no idea what rational means. You've just equated instinct with rational.
Well, no, I didn't. I was.
Yeah, you did.
I was saying rational, really, but
And
I'm trying to paint the picture that I think a brain, if they don't like the idea, that it would automatically probably
we can't keep going over this,
think
Steve.
about supernatural
yeah,
things.
Steve, we can't keep going over this. There's other callers
Okay,
waiting.
all right.
he's saying the same
Okay,
thing
okay.
over and over.
Cool. Thanks a lot for calling,
All right.
though.
Thank
Okay,
you.
bye-bye.
Yeah. I agree it happens.
Yeah.
Not necessarily that it's rational. I wanted a rational reason. Of course, I wanted a rational reason to change my beliefs, and all I can get is I like it better. Okay.
Well, and I knew when I told that story, it's like he's going to look at this, he's going to say, "Oh no, but you weren't
quite there.
quite there." It's like, okay.
Yeah. Meanwhile, the guy behind you was.
Yeah.
And instead of me thinking about whether or not I'm hitting power lines, I'd have been saying, "Would you shut the hell up? I'm trying to save our butts."
Yeah. Fortunately, I couldn't hear him over the.
Yeah, it's
you know,
very good.
The engine noise. So.
Yeah, pray quietly. I'm trying to think here.
Yeah, he wasn't transmitting his prayers. So.
We put prayer closets in the back of helicopters now. We've got John. It says King of Prussia.
Yeah.
Is that a real place?
It's around Valley Forge, close to Philadelphia.
Oh yeah, awesome. Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for calling.
Hi. Yeah, thanks. I basically am calling. A friend wanted me to sort of try out an argument that I have for the existence of like a human soul, the spirit having like reason, free will, and consciousness.
Okay.
Okay.
That's a big one.
Yeah.
Matter of fact,
first,
reason, free will, and consciousness, that's three big ones.
yeah.
Go ahead.
But I wanted to try to just make a few points briefly, if that's okay.
Okay.
Just about like my understanding of the idea from earlier in the show, where like religion and the poverty thing, how they correlate to each other. I personally think that it is more like being in that state will lead you more to an awareness of your dependence on God, and not vice versa. I think like the fact that there's poverty in a lot of those areas is due to like soil infertility, population density, the fact that they didn't have the same resources and inventors from the Industrial Revolution, things like that.
Okay, that's one of two takes on it. My question to that is, you're convinced that it's poverty that leads people to these more religious positions.
I think that's one factor that can be.
Sure,
yeah.
sure. My follow-up question is, do you think that has any ties to whether or not those religions are true?
I don't really think so, but I wasn't really planning to go there.
No, that's fine. I just wanted to check.
Yeah.
Keep going.
And you mentioned something about like the cosmic joke of our immortal life. I think of that more as like a preparation period. Like I'm not universalist where everybody has the same destination in the afterlife necessarily. One of the previous callers said something about the Christian Bible study. I think, it depends on the denomination what their approach to the Bible is. And, of course, in any religion, you'll have believers who are more or less honest or sinful or even knowledgeable about their own beliefs.
Okay.
But to get into my argument here, and I kind of see this as sort of a background for belief in God, although that's not what I'm trying to argue here. But I kind of see, like, what reasons do I have to believe in religion? I think, to a certain extent, it's rational to believe other people and other traditions. Like, why would they bother going through the centuries with these beliefs? Cosmological things like who started the Big Bang, if there was something like that. Again, you said, like, I'm posing the question as a who, but...
Well, I'm a little confused, actually, because
yeah,
you said you were going to argue for the existence of a soul, and that it wasn't necessarily... You weren't going to necessarily argue for the existence of God, and yet the first couple things you pop off are the argument from popularity, which is why would they believe these things for so long, to which the answer is because they didn't know any better. Yeah. And then the cosmological argument, which is one of many arguments that have been formally presented that are all logically flawed at some level.
Right.
Whether it's the anthropic principle or teleological. I mean, if you want to go down that road, we can, but there are a bunch of callers waiting. We only got 20 minutes left, so if you want to just get to the souls one, that'd be great.
So really, I was just going to say those are sort of my own ways to move on from the basic point here, which is like, I did not create myself, but I believe I have a spirit, so therefore I have to look elsewhere. So my argument as far as the spirit itself or the soul...
Hey, I got to pause you again, John.
Yeah.
And I do this for a reason, and it's because if there's a point of contention early on in a discussion, and I sit here and let you get all the way to the end, by the time we get back to it, you've developed from that. Right. So you said that you didn't create yourself, and you believe you have a soul.
Right.
Okay, I agree. You didn't create yourself. I think we'd all be in agreement that you are the product of your mother and father. Mm-hmm. And the second thing that you said, where you believe you have a soul, if you're going to start off with that as a presupposition, you've kind of already set yourself up to argue in a circle.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I'm saying I draw that from the argument that I'm about to go into.
Oh, okay. So you just stated the conclusion up front. Go ahead.
Well, so what are you defining? What's your definition of a soul?
So, my friend pointed out that I'd probably have to be pretty good with that. I think it's like the non-material, self-conscious aspect of your being that incorporates free will and reasoning, like the mind.
Okay, but we already know that the brain's responsible for reasoning.
Well, we know that at least what I would say, the soul makes use of the brain.
Oh, you think?
And draws from our perceived knowledge from our senses.
So the soul is the non-material part of your being that uses your brain.
Yeah.
Okay. What reason do you have for thinking that even exists?
For the soul.
Because I'm curious, because in a lot of ways I could say that a soul is the non-material part of this cup that keeps the water in.
Right. So
I already know that function's done by the cup. So what justification do I have for adding a soul as a non-material, non-demonstrable aspect of this cup that does the function that we already know the cup does?
Well, you could say that it never acts on its own behalf. But then we get into the argument for perception of mind in other beings, this hypersensitive agency detection device theory of mind.
Yeah.
But the point I wanted to get to is that I think in our own consciousness, the fact that we have an understanding of what, even discussing this with you, the fact that I say the word soul or spirit and include these other things, consciousness and free will, I think just the fact that we have an understanding of what they mean sort of proves that we have some non-physical element.
Really?
So the fact that there is meaning there.
So, John, the fact that when I say unicorn, you understand what it means? Does that mean unicorns exist?
No, but here's why.
All right, so that debunks what you just said, I think, right?
Well, here's why you believe you... Well, so with a unicorn, basically, you have the image of a horse...
No. All right, we could pick something entirely different. What we're talking about is we've defined a term, and it has entered the public consciousness as a meme. That doesn't point to whether or not that doesn't tell us whether or not it points to anything that actually exists.
Well, here's
you can
what
do
I'm saying.
the unicorn model.
As an example.
You can do the unicorn.
That represents things that we do know the meaning of: a horse, a body, a shape, a dimension, length, width, volume, mass, whatever. But all these other things are things that we know of that are not spiritual. Right. But when I say spirit or soul, there's no non-material, or there's no material things that add up and convey the meaning.
Which is why we had you define it at the beginning. Because when you say spirit or soul, I have no idea what you're talking about until you define it. All I know is that spirit and soul